Okay, I think we'll make a start now. If that's okay, Penny. We'll continue to let people in as they arrive, but we'll kick off because we've just started now today. So welcome everybody. We today's session is for the Neighbourhood Mental Health Team Standard Operating Procedure, the SOP. So just checking everyone's in the right place. So hello, I think I've met lots of you before, but for anybody that I haven't met, my name is Andrea Potter, and I'm the VCSE, so the Voluntary Community and Social Enterprise lead within the Transformation Programme for East Sussex and Brighton and Hove. And I am going to be leading the session with my colleague. I'm going to hand over to Penny to introduce herself, if that's okay, Penny.
Certainly. Good morning. I'm Penny Fenton. I'm the Senior Transformation Manager employed by the Trust, but working across all of our partners and a nurse. Been working on this programme since the beginning, really, so for the last few years.
Brilliant. Thank you. So just wanted to let everybody know that we are recording the session today, and that's because lots of people wanted to attend but were unable to do so. We wanted to record it to ensure that we can share that back with anyone that wasn't able to make it. If you'd like to sort of stay anonymous, obviously you can keep your cameras off. That's no problem at all. So we have an hour today. We're going to be running from 9:30 until 10:30, and we're going to start with a short presentation that will give the background on the SOP, so kind of how it was created, the main areas that it covers, and then after the presentation there'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions that you have around the SOP as well. We won't have time to introduce everyone today because of sort of the time that we have. We want to really make sure that we dedicate that to the questions. But please do use the chat to put any questions in as we go, and we'll make sure that we return to those in the Q&A part of today's webinar. So yeah, just add to the chat, please. Okay, so I'm going to bring up some short slides that we're going to start with just to give you the background around the SOP, and then we will move into the Q&A part. So I'm going to share my screen. Oh, I think people are having audio problems. Hopefully you can log out and log back in again. Hopefully that will fix it, that old IT trick. And obviously there is the recording as well, so please don't worry. Okay, so I'll share my screen with you. See the slides. Brilliant. So yes, as I said, we're going to be focusing on the standard operating procedure, the SOP, today. So just wanted to give a little bit of background around kind of why the SOP was created and kind of what it covers as well. So in terms of the SOP, we know with the neighbourhood mental health teams, we're bringing together different services to work together as one, and we knew that via the SOP, we needed to make sure we have a unified operational approach for the core team. So what the SOP is doing is making sure that it really outlines that single approach and that framework for neighbourhood teams as we look to go live in November. I think it's about 37 days now. So it really lays down that framework. And as many of you know, with neighbourhood mental health teams, it's about bringing those core teams together. And via the SOP, we want to make sure it includes the detail of how those core teams will work together, much more collaboratively as we go live. It also details the kind of the full journey that a client might have through a neighbourhood mental health team. So different stages, so including access and referral, screening, triage, assessment, right through to sort of treatment and support, and also ending of a support and reaccessing the services as well. Via the SOP also helps to lay out the roles, responsibilities and safeguards for staff. So it gives that detail around clinical responsibility. It gives detail around patient safety incidents, consent, and working with individuals and their families as well. So really giving that information about how things will work differently from the 10th of November. Wanted to just say at the beginning as well that obviously this is the first neighbourhood mental health team, but neighbourhood mental health team SOP, but it will continue to evolve. So really at the beginning of the sort of the journey around working together, and it will need to be reviewed as the way that we work together kind of evolves and changes. So we are planning to have sort of review periods around the SOP to add in more detail as we kind of integrate even further and we get more familiar with some of the technology that will be in place, such as System 1 as well, around how it will really work in practice. So that's the overview around the SOP. So as I said, that's sort of, in terms of the purpose of why we've got it, it really is to make sure that we have a single operational framework for neighbourhood teams going forward. It supports with that integration of those services. And also kind of the key thing as well is it aligns with the national standards that we have around the delivery of mental health services as well. So making sure that they're really embedded within the document too. So that's the background of kind of why we've got it and what it covers. In terms of the SOP, just wanted to pause now and just ask a really quick question. So we know that the SOP document is quite long, and we just wanted to check around kind of people that are here today around whether you've had the chance to fully sort of read the SOP yet or not. I'm going to do a really quick poll, and there's no wrong or right answers, so don't worry if you just can be honest around if you've had the chance to sort of read it yet, just so we know when we're kind of moving into the Q&A part as well. As I said, we do know it is quite long, and we will be working to produce a slightly shorter version as well to help with accessibility. But if you can just complete the poll now, just to give us an idea of how many people here today have had a chance to read it. So I'll launch that now. So that should be on your screens now. And you can just vote. That would be really helpful. That's working for most people. Oh, brilliant. That's great. I think most people had the chance to vote now. If you aren't able to vote, please do drop it in the chat instead. Okay, fabulous. So we can see, can we all see the results, or is it just the results on my screen? That's sharing publicly, Penny.
Sorry, Andrea, say that again. It's in the chat.
It's in the chat. Brilliant. Lovely. So you can see the results. So we've got yes, 31%, and no, 69%. So that's really helpful to see. Thank you around who has had the chance to read it. So see that most people, more people haven't had a chance yet. So that's really helpful. Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to hand over to Penny now, who's going to give us some more information around the SOP, if that's okay, before we move into the Q&A section. So I'll bring the slides back up if that's okay, Penny, and hand over to you.
Great. Yeah, thank you very much. There's just a question in the chat about where you can find from Richard the SOP. We'd be able to send you the link. Can you put it in the chat, Andrea, please?
Yes,
thank you. And if you can't get to it, we'll obviously make sure you can after the session. So thank you, Andrea. Just a little bit of background about the SOP development. As many of you know on this call, people that have been involved in it, this has been going on for quite some time. At some point in the journey of neighbourhood mental health teams, there was discussion about an interim SOP, and that was created, reviewed by a whole range of system partners. We had about 300 comments back from it, and as it was circulated out far and wide, it then came back to the programme board, and then at that point the overwhelming response really was the interim wasn't as helpful as it could be because it wouldn't last for long enough. So it was better then that we carried on doing a bit more work with the EPR, with the new EPR, with System 1, and we started to embed things a little more, and then we worked on the creation of a full initial NMHP standard operating process for the core NMHT. So this is the BCSE elements and SPFT working together in a much more integrated way with our core partners, GPs, etc. So that's what we did. So we obviously listened to all of that and did that. And then we went away as a full group, worked with lots of really helpful experts by experience. Thank you to a lot of people on this call that contributed to that and fed back information to us. And we created the fuller initial NMHT for standard for go live on November the 10th. We will review this. It can't be a live document in that we can't go in every day and keep reviewing it and reviewing it and reviewing it and reviewing it. But what we did do, and what we do still have, is a log of anything that comes back, not just from sessions like this, but from all sorts of various places about various about various bits and pieces. And what we have done is where it's critical to go live. So if there's been a risk, there was a slight error in some of the wording around one of the safeguarding sections, for example, obviously we needed to go and change that. But other than that, we'll lock it down as it is until we have a formal review. But to let you know where it went back out to SOP review group. As I said, we incorporated any of those comments, and this final version has been produced. It went through the Community Mental Health Transformation Board. And for those people who don't know what that is or who's there, it's a board made up of all of the lead agencies, SPFT, VCSE leads, expert by experience leads, social care leads. When they're there, they're not always there, to be fair. And that is a place where we sign off our initial documents like the SOP. After that, it went to something called the Operational Delivery Subcommittee. That was on the 11th of September. We took it there. That's where within SPFT, the operational leads sign this off. So that's chaired by John Child and attended to by senior operational colleagues. And then we started the circulation on the 22nd of September. That went out obviously to all of the triumvirate within SPFT, general managers for cascading out, voluntary sector leads for cascading out. And this is where we sit today. Go to the next slide, please, Andrea. This is the review group that it went out to, that we referred to before. Once we'd done that second round, we sent it out. I'd just like to highlight in terms of East Sussex, because I think we've got mainly East Sussex colleagues with us today. Obviously, thank you to everyone. I could see people like Julia on the call. I could see people like Jackie Flack, Glenn McCready, got together with groups of people and really came back to us to make those comments. Helen Lofthouse, a number of people. So forgive me if I haven't mentioned everyone, but just like to say thank you at this point to East Sussex for really having a look at that and bringing this information back to us so we could make sure we'd made those changes before we made that, before we agreed that final template of the SOP and as it is today. Can we go to the next one, please? So we've had a couple of amendments. As we said, Andrea set up a really good log for us. So we look at everything that comes in. We obviously log it. And if we can't change it immediately because it might be kind of important but won't stop us going live, we'll keep that logged, because there will be obviously another review of this SOP as we know more and things change. Things that have changed and things that we've managed to kind of move around slightly is some wording around eligibility in relation to dementia, and we worked with Padma Dolby to make sure that was correct, and we're able to make that those changes. There was some feedback about duty and contact and the use of phones and emails, so that bit we are making some changes to make sure that's reflected. There was something in the risk language which didn't quite reflect the new way of us managing risks, that referred to need as well as risk, so we've made those changes. I talked about the safeguarding part that needed a very slight tweak, but an important tweak, so that has happened. And the CPA replacement, I'll talk about a little bit, because CPA, as I've talked about quite often before, has been phased out nationally, and we were asked to replace CPA with something modernised. And initially we weren't given a framework. NHS England then, about 8 or 9 months ago or so, decided we did need a framework, and they produced something called the Personalised Care Framework, which replaced CPA. We were all a bit surprised, and it was a bit of a rowback from the kind of original view that people would work in a different way to create their own. But it has been helpful in that it has given us a consistent framework. For some of us that have been around a long time, it's a good time for us to look at it, because the wording in the first instance doesn't look hugely different to CPA. So we really, really needed to have a look at it and work with it. One of the big differences was, and is the absolute reinforcement that people that are named workers can be anybody with that skill set to provide that intervention, rather than the reliance on the association with lead practitioner and always having to be a clinician. So they were the big changes. They then delayed the final version of the personalised care framework, but they have sent out a version 2, and they have said they're unlikely to replace it. So I'll talk about it a little bit more when we go through some other slides about what's in the SOP. We also had some communication from some of our medical colleagues. So again, thank you for that. I know it's tricky, and it's really tricky to get a range of people, and the fewer in terms of volume of people that are around, the harder that is. So that was really, really gratefully received. And it was obviously reviewed by Dr. Oliver Dale, our Chief Medical Officer. So that was very helpful. As we said at the bottom, we will continue to make any critical changes, but the non-essential changes will be logged and actions during the next formal SOP review. So although this doesn't seem like a long time away, what was really important is that we really hear quickly about what's there, what's helpful, what's missing, what else do we need, how do we change things if we need to, what detail do we need to add. And this is particularly in relation to the EPR. As we all start to go through our training and learn more and more, we've tried to incorporate all we can to date, but as you can imagine, we're trying to release this standard operating procedure enough time for people to see it at the same time as the standard operating procedure for the EPR. And those two things have got obviously a very strong interface, because that's the clinical record system that we use. That's where that's got such a strong interdependency. So for the next one, please, Andrea. So you'll see some main themes for those people who understandably haven't had time to fully read the standard operating procedure. Absolutely get that. Really, really encourage people, and I know people are all trying their absolute best to do this, to make sure you're having those conversations in teams, having an opportunity, using existing times perhaps to be able to go through the SOP, team meetings, etc., etc. But completely get everybody is very busy at this moment in time, and I'm hoping it won't be too much of a shock to anyone, because it has had quite widespread input into it. So the big things that we start to see that are different is that name, primary care and partnerships. So those are places who have things like the emotional wellbeing services, the access facilitators in terms of the VCSE, screen and intervene, recovery workers or mental health support coordinators, all coming together to form this primary care and partnership function of our overarching NMHT. And just to be clear and to reinforce why this was important, is the initial focus needed to be on a whole team for a neighbourhood, but we recognised, of course, that we need to understand what's the parts within it, and how can they function, and how can they understand who they work with. So that's why those things were put in there, but with the ambition, and I know a lot of places have all rolled this out, that people from each of those functions come together regularly through various meetings to provide a smoother experience where people need to move in and out and across different elements of our services. And then we have specialist adults and specialist older adults, which before was referred to as DOPAMs and SOAMs. But so we had some really core, clear, consistent names across the whole of Sussex. These were the three names that were landed after much deliberation and consideration. So you'll start to hear and see those languages, and hopefully people have seen the emails, footers and headers, and all of those bits and pieces that have gone out about how we may start to refer to ourselves as for example, Penny Fenton, mental health nurse, and I don't know, triage lead. And I would say I work for X, doesn't matter where, Sussex, NMHT, and in brackets, I would say specialist adults, specialist older adults, or primary care and partnerships. So it's really, really trying to not split us up into those three spaces, but to say we are one team, but we need to recognise we've all got a skill and a section and function to work on within that team. Have the next slide, please. The next bit that I know has been subject to much discussion is the NMHT meetings, and these really were a framework to say, how can we work together better in a more structured way that feels safe for everybody, that moves us all slightly out of our comfort zone, and really, really supports us to work in a big cohesive way with the rest of our providers across all of East Sussex, West Sussex and Brighton and Hove. And there's been varying degrees of success, and they're in various places across East Sussex, West Sussex and Brighton and Hove, and there's been lots and lots of learning. So thank you for people that have fed back that learning, and thank you for the people that are testing these out to see how we move, how agile we need to be around them, what changes we might need to make. But they are a framework to start those conversations, a vehicle if you like, because This SOP represents the beginning of our journey in neighbourhood teams. This is setting the foundations for working in a much more systemic way as a system, starting to really think about the next 10-year forward plan. And some of people on the call will have already started to see the early implementers for 24/7 core neighbourhood teams across environments and areas. If people are particularly interested, ELF are one of those early implementers and have some really good write-ups about where they've got to so far. And we are likely in East Sussex to be a second wave early implementer. I think it's going to be hot off the press. It was relatively hot off the press. I think it's Hastings and Rother, and they're just looking about how that may happen. So really exciting stuff for us to start to really think about how do we think about neighbourhood health and care as we move together, as we start to really work in these quite different ways. Have the next one, please, Andrew. And it really, really is starting to help us structure this kind of end-to-end care journey for people and for people working in our services. So really starting to think about that no wrong front door. What does that really mean? So where people pitch up anywhere and start to express whatever it is those people are approaching services or organisations with, that we can start to really understand that and hear it and come together where we need to, but also make resource of all of the other things that are out there. We've worked in silos for a really, really long time, although there's been lots and lots of really good work to try and reach out. We know that's often been a little bit of a challenge. It's often quite difficult to do in practice for all sorts of different reasons. And this is really a way of saying, okay, how do we start to pull this together? How do we have an atrium where all of these brilliant services come together and start to think about how they can support or work with an individual? And the new EPR is really important to that, because we know in early implementer sites around NMHTs that a shared EPR is a real element of each place's success. You can start to see what everybody, not what everybody's doing, but where bits of the system are working together well. It's really, there was important for us to include carers in there to make sure that we continue to work with carers. Those who work in SPFT will be really familiar with the triangle of care. That's also continues to be supported in the new EPR. And one of the things our carers and people who use our services fed back on really heavily was about this sending of referrals back and forth, and how that might felt to people, and how we might start to avoid doing those things by working together in a different sort of way. There's been lots of discussion, and rightly so, about information sharing and consent, and we spent a lot of time thinking about that, working those things through, and we have now have a big section of this in that standard operating procedure. We've also got information going out to GP practices and to people who use our services so they can really understand it. And we've been really lucky that the lived experience groups in East Sussex, West Sussex and Brighton and Hove are really helping us with this, shape the language so people can understand it. I've talked about triangle of care. Dialogue Plus, so the structure and templates have been introduced. That was a decision a little while ago. Understand from feedback that the comms may not have been as efficient as it could have been. And I spoke with James Atkinson and other colleagues a couple of days ago now to say, oh, there's something here that's missing. We have got a video training that's been produced by an expert by experience that's just about to be released, and there's comms that the EPR training team are sending out about it very shortly. But there's also a lot of discussion around the outcome measures. At the moment we use Requal. I worked with lots of colleagues, with Tasia Lopez, with Lisa West, with lots of people in East Sussex about getting us to start to really use outcome measures. And then I think for some people this felt a bit like, oh, what's happened, and is this still really important? And I'd say yes, it absolutely is still really critical and important. And as I say, I won't spend time on it now, but there'll be comms coming out really helping us to think about how that decision was made. And I would really encourage people to have a look at that video. As I say, it's produced by somebody called Gemini, who did a lot of training in Surrey and Borders when they started to roll Dialogue Plus out. So not just the outcome measure, but the concept of making every contact matter, really using the information that we gather when we meet with people to work through whatever it is that we're working through when we see them. The next one, please. So one of the other issues that's been discussed a lot is about having some clear roles around clinical responsibility and patient safety, because it's tricky here, isn't it? Because we're bringing discussions into a shared space. As it stands now, people who work in the emotional wellbeing service and for people that are being seen within that service, that clinical responsibility sits with the GP, which we're really hoping will continue because that makes the most sense. We do need to continue to have ongoing conversations with our GP colleagues around that. That is in the existing memorandum of understanding for where people have EWS services in place. So we really want to be clear about that, and we've prepared and updated those MOUs, and we just agreed yesterday about taking a little bit more time with our GPs and with our colleagues across the organisations to really nail that down so it's fit for the future, because some of our language has changed and people need to understand that. Of course, we've got a whole raft of comms with GPs anyway, but this bit feels really important. There's some information in there about the named worker, and that also reflects, and again thanks to East Sussex, the work that's happening around clinics to try and manage capacity and demand, because the personalised care framework doesn't talk to clinics, it talks to allocating everyone. But we took this to QRMC, obviously recognising the pressure that we all feel in services and the use of those clinics, and hence having it its own section in the standard operating procedure around it under that named worker section. There was also issues about how we manage safeguarding, because we are a multi-provider, a group of providers working collaboratively. We don't have a lead provider model. Therefore, it's very challenging to have single processes for every part of those providers, every provider space. So at the moment, we don't have enough shared processes, so we're still having to work through those individual processes in some cases. But what we're really working hard together on is making sure we can align them, bring them together, only slightly amend them, etc., where we need to. And we have worked on the active engagement policy and shared that with colleagues like Ra, who's been really active in trying to bring those together to reflect the SPFT active engagement policy, but slightly amend it for VCSE audiences. And the reason that's important is otherwise we get disproportionate responses to things. So we over medicalize or we over manage things potentially if we use the kind of what was called secondary care, that kind of high end, perhaps working with people with more complex needs or higher level needs, and so our reactions to things may be slightly different. It's not to say that any part of the system shouldn't have a really strong active engagement policy, for example, but it just varies a little bit in language and process, etc. But we're really working hard, and we really want over the next year to bring as many of our processes together as possible. Thank you. So the next steps, hopefully more of you will have had chance to read through the standard operating procedures, and we are from these meetings and from other queries starting to add to frequently asked questions so we can make sure people have got all of the information that they need as we progress. There's the document location that you can see there. That won't change, so it's on our internet, but we are looking at other places where this may need to be held. In terms of Sussex Partnership, we're not fabulous yet at being very clear around where SOPs will sit. So we will discuss it with the communications team to make sure that's really clear. We're really keen to hear today if there's any other ideas around SOP sessions, support to share this with wider teams. Does this feel in hand in East Sussex? Are those discussions starting to take place? Is there anything else we can do? We will start to add more details, we've said, as we move forward, as we understand those EPR processes more and more, and we're working really closely with the EPR team to try and ensure that everything marries up. You can imagine it's, for all of us, isn't it? It's quite complicated as we're trying to move to a new system. But really important, the end result will be this shared record, which I know lots of us on this call have been trying to work towards for a very long time. So there is lots of interface with other key documents. We've talked about EPR. There's also obviously an interface with the NMHT service specification, which is being kind of thrashed out and agreed between providers and with the ICB. And that isn't quite at sign off. It almost is. We hoped it would be at this stage, but it isn't going to stop us progressing because it's almost there. And then, of course, that will be shared so people can really see it very, very clearly. We have obviously the standard operating procedure, and we are working really hard on a collaboration agreement. So that's really talking to the key providers, and at this stage, that's Sussex Partnership Trust and the two lead VCSE providers, South Down for East Sussex and Brighton and Hove Housing Trust in partnership with West Sussex Mine for West Sussex. So all of these documents will come together that should support us all in feeling more supported in how we deliver these changes to the ways in which we operate. So I'm going to stop there. I think that was the last one. We do have a last slide, which we'll share at the end, which gives you links to all of our webinars, to sign up to the monthly newsletters that we hold, to join the VCSE mental health networks, emails, etc., access our frequently asked questions. We're really keen that people, wherever they possibly can, get involved. We do video everything we can because we absolutely know how pressured people are and how much time is taken up, obviously, with just delivering services, but also how keen people are to be involved in the changes. So it's trying to find that balance. So any other ideas about how we can do that, of course, please do let us know as well.